You're now listening to the Fullerton Unfiltered podcast. Straightforward, no nonsense business advice. Completely unfiltered. Grow your business. Grow your life. Now, here's your host, Brian Fullerton.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Well, welcome to another episode of the Fullerton Unfiltered podcast. Appreciate you guys joining in with us. Hey, we have a different type of podcast that we're going to do, one that maybe you guys have thought about, maybe you haven't thought about, but we're going to be talking about trademark law. We're going to be talking about trademarks, copyrights, all these different things to protect your business name, all the different entities that you got going on. A lot of you guys have really appreciated these kind of X's and O's type of podcasts as you grow a more successful business. So on the line with me is actually one of the guys that I work with. He's helped me grow my companies. We've had a good friendship and partnership for the last couple of months here because my business is growing and changing, and there's things that I have to work on. So joining me on the line, we have a friend named Mark Goodman with the Goodman Law Center. Mark, good morning. How you doing, brother? I'm
doing very well. Yourself?
I'm doing great. We're rocking and rolling, man. We're doing a marathon of podcasts today, and I'm just awesome. I'm just honored with all the different guests that I have on. A lot of people way smarter than I am, which is always a good sign. You know, I'm hanging with the cool kids. You know, so.
Well, I really appreciate you having me on, Brian. This is a thrill to get to do this. So I'm excited to get started.
100%. So you know, so here's a little bit of context. The last 6 months to a year, my business has grown. We've done some stuff with YouTube. So I've had to have different conversations with the structure of my business, right? We've heard from Garrett Sutton. We've heard from different people that are advising me behind the scenes, you know. And one thing is I had to pay attention recently to some trademark and copyright stuff because I wanted to protect my intellectual property, if you will, my logo, my branding. You know, we're on the internet in front of 1 million people a month. You know, these are different conversations that I never expected 10 years ago. But even in a practical sense, I never thought about trademarking and copywriting my actual business logo, my business name. You know, I want to protect my company and everything that we got going on. So this might be a different conversation than you guys are used to. Not a lot of people talk about these things, which is why we have an expert on the line. So how about this, Mark? Before we jump down the rabbit hole here, why don't you give everybody who maybe doesn't know who you are, maybe your 30 to 60 second maybe introduction so they kind of know who you are and where you're coming from.
Sure. So once again, my name is Mark Goodman. I'm the principal of the Goodman Law Center here in Reno, Nevada, and I've been practicing law now for about 15 years. And I, you know, just going back to school, I went to undergrad at UC Berkeley, University of San Francisco Law School, and then I, you know, been out practicing since 2005, and my practice focuses on, as you mentioned, intellectual property. So that can include trademarks, copyrights, patents, trade secrets, and also include some advice on business law related to those items. You know, I'm licensed to practice law in both Nevada and state of California, although with respect to most patent, trademark, copyright matters that I accept, I can actually take cases nationwide.
Nice.
In those areas, because those are federal law matters, and we're just dealing with filings with the federal government.
Okay.
So as long as you're licensed to practice in a certain state for copyright and trademark, you know, I can take the case. Now, with respect to patents, I actually have a special bar in order to practice patent prosecution to help people prepare and file patent applications. And this is something Brian and I have not worked on at all, because Brian, I don't know if you're an inventor or anything at all, but if we do that has a special bar that I also have a certification for. And to do that, you have to have a degree in science or engineering in addition to being a lawyer. So there's a little bit of
this is good.
Rarefied air there.
No, for sure. Well, I'm excited about having you on the podcast. A lot of folks have heard the podcast with Garrett Sutton, who's a Rich Dad advisor. You're friends with Garrett, so you guys can see this whole little network that we're using behind the scenes to you know, honestly, CYA, you know, cover your assets. Is that what they say, Mark? So,
yeah.
So we're gonna do this. Let's hear from the announcements. I really respect your time and your calendar. I don't want to you know, ramble here. So let's hear from the announcements, and then we'll jump right back into things.
Have you ever thought about starting your own lawn and landscaping business, but not sure where to start? Look no further than LawnTrepreneurAcademy.com, an e-training website dedicated to helping you start and grow a successful lawn care business. Save more time and make way more money by learning exactly what it takes to grow your business to the next level. Invest in your future by first investing in yourself. Use promo code PODCAST to save 10% on all training programs today at LawnTrepreneurAcademy.com. Now, back to the show.
All right, cool deal. So, Mark, a lot of folks, as you know, and I was kind of giving you the lay of the land for my listeners and my audience. They're small business owners. We're entrepreneurs. Yeah. Of course, most of us participate in the green industry with lawn care, landscaping, hardscaping. So, literally, we're the guy that comes to your house and we mow your lawn for $40-$50, and yep. Hopefully you give us a Gatorade at the end of the day. Just kidding. Yeah. And so we're running small businesses. Most of us are, running businesses from, 50 to 100 grand a year in gross revenue to, $1 million plus in gross revenue. But we're that small business owner. Maybe it's us, maybe a couple guys working for us, and we're that small town local lawn and landscape company. But how I've always approached my business is thinking of it as a big business. You know what I mean? I've always wanted to do what the big boys do. And I mean the Walmarts, the IBMs, the these big mega companies. Like I've learned that there's a way to structure my business, run my taxes, protect my assets. There's different things that you can do behind the scenes to participate like the big boys and get the big boy advantages, right? And, one conversation that doesn't have happen enough, and I rarely see talked about, not only in the green industry, but I'm just talking about small business owners, and that is the topic of copyright and trademark. So we're really going to dive deep with this. You are the resident expert on this. Yep. So we're going to talk about, what's the difference between all these things? When do you need them? How does it relate to a small business like mine? So let's do this. Before we handle all those quick FAQs that I got for you, why don't you maybe, if you want, take 5 minutes, maybe share your story about how you got involved in this business and this industry, because it is a very niche offering, and you got to have some passion behind what you're doing to get involved with what you're doing, right?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It actually started because I was a science major back in school, back in college, and I got out and I worked in the biotech industry a little bit after college, and I kind of just wanted something a little bit different than being in the lab. Mm-hmm. It just wasn't quite. I didn't feel the passion to keep going, even though I liked it at some level. So I found out this idea. Well, hey, if you have a background in science, engineering, technology, but you can become a lawyer and combine it, that there's a lot of good opportunities. I thought that would be really cool. It's kind of a combination of different areas of expertise and areas that I was interested in.
Sure.
And so, and then I went back through the whole law school thing, passed the bar, and then ended up also passing another bar, going here to Reno, Nevada, and getting started. It's interesting how certain things change in your career too. I think it early on, if you'd asked me back in law school and stuff, I don't know if I ever envisioned myself just running my own law firm. I kind of thought, well, it'll be big firms or companies or big things. And then when I kind of got into it a little bit, it just became very clear that I didn't want to work for anybody else.
Yeah.
I wanted to run my own company and own my life and all of that. So that trade-off I took 100%.
Okay. And then so, you were working with really close to a friend of yours, Garrett Sutton, right? You guys you went to school together or college, or what was that?
We didn't go to school together. He's a few years older than I am, but he was out in practice.
Sure.
And what happened was I actually was a fan of the Rich Dad series of books, and I'd read Garrett Sutton's first book, Own Your Own Corporation, even before I met him. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of cool. But when I came here to Reno, and Garrett's based out of Reno, I actually got an interview with him to maybe work for him, and he ended up hiring somebody that just had more overall experience. But I had mentioned in the interview that I had some ambition about being on my own, and he mentioned that he had an extra office space available that he could rent out cheap to me, so I took the deal and that was the time I would get started. I had separated from the one job in town I'd had prior to that.
Okay.
And it was great because the first year of business, I didn't pay any rent because I just did little projects for Gary. He would give me, okay, Goodman, I need you to research this issue for me, my clients or whatever, and I'd take care of that, and so I didn't have to pay rent for a while.
Nice.
So that's always helpful to get started because even when you're starting out, if you and all your listeners understand, it's even these little expenses are big.
Oh yeah.
Right. So and now I would look at it like, wow, I would just pay that smaller rent and get a client and get moving, right? I wouldn't.
The good old days,
research project for it, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Now I feel you. Now I got these big trucks and these, payroll and taxes,
yeah.
and I'm like, what happened? Like my goal was just to make a couple $100 a day. Now I'm like, if we don't make a couple $100 days, we're going backwards, And
exactly, yeah. Well, all of us have that experience in business, I think.
Sure, 100%. Well, so let's talk about the meat, the trademark and the copy, because so much, here's the deal. It's not only the information that I want you to present, it's the misinformation out there that I see so many people giving advice on that respectfully don't have any credibility offering. Right. And so it's the misinformation that really frustrates me in today's society with everybody's a professional because they have Google or Facebook. Right. And if you don't believe me, just go, post a photo of some weird growth on your arm on Facebook and you'll get 80 doctors. You didn't know your family was all doctors. Right. So or you go Google WebMD and everything says cancer, and it's like, oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. So here's the deal. Can you help us out with what is trademark or trademark law? What is copyrights? What's copyright law? Really simple question right down the middle for you, if you don't mind me asking.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's no problem. So what we're doing, just panning back a little bit, is the term intellectual property, right? So this includes trademarks, copyrights, also includes patents, trade secrets, and some other niche intellectual property. And what intellectual property is the idea that you're owning something. And when you own something, you have the right to exclude other people from that thing. So imagine, that's really, when you think about, I like to couch this in the context of real estate because people understand intuitively real estate more, right? So if you own a piece of real estate, what does that actually mean? The main part of it, you have the right to be there, right? But you also have the right to say, no, you get off my land. Right.
Sure.
Good analogy. This is my territory, and if that real estate has value to others, well, then they may pay to be there, to rent it, or you may be able to use that in some other way to economically benefit you. But the fact that you have that space blocking out other people is valuable, right? And so it can be the same thing in the area of intellectual property, right? But you're owning different things. You're not owning a piece of the earth here, right? You're owning an idea, right? So each of these subsets of intellectual property are just different types of concepts that you can protect from others. So when you talk about trademark, right? And trademark we'll start with because I think it's the most applicable if people in the lawn care business and so forth or similar areas. It'll be the most likely to apply, although we'll talk about them all here. Is a trademark is protect your branding, okay? Branding is that sort of shortcut that consumers make. They see a certain brand, they like the brand, and then they trust the brand, and they go to that brand. So it's very valuable economically in that regard, right? Just think about walking down the street every day. The example I use on a lot of my consults is, let's say, you're sick of the lawn care business, and I'm sick of practicing law, Brian, and you and I want to start go into business together, and we want to start a coffee shop, right, Brian? So we need to come up with a name for our coffee shop, Brian. What do you want to call it?
The Mark and Brian, so we'll call it maybe good coffee, like MB. MB coffee.
Maybe pretty good
maybe
name.
Maybe good coffee.
I've got a better idea. You know what? I came up with one, Brian. Let's just call it Starbucks.
Oh, okay.
Sounds like that has a good ring to it.
Yeah.
You think?
Yeah.
All right.
We'll sell it.
So if we did that, okay, Brian, you understand what would happen, right? Now all your listeners know what would happen. We would get sued, and we get sued on the first day of business.
Right.
Pulled a stunt like this. But it wouldn't be based on copyright or patent or contract law or property law or anything else. It would be based on trademark infringement, right? Because we would be infringing on the Starbucks company's right to that name. Well, and I like to stop and think about, well, why? Like, what problem would this cause, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's say we did this, right? People would be going to our phony baloney Starbucks thinking they're at a regular Starbucks that's associated or affiliated with the Starbucks company, and the coffee would be different, the ambiance is different, prices is different. They would, and the consumers would be confused. They'd be like, I'm totally confused here. Are you guys part of Starbucks? Is Starbucks gone downhill, or are they? I don't understand. I'm just confused.
Confusing.
I just wanted my triple mocha frappuccino, and now my day's ruined because I'm like totally confused about what's going on here.
Right.
But that would be the harm to the public that the government is redressing by establishing trademark law. And it makes sense because in addition to the consumer confusion, the additional layer of policy here is that, look, if we did this, the money that we would earn is revenue that honestly should be going to the Starbucks company because that's what the consumers thought they were buying, right? They recognize the name. In other words, the law is just recognizing that consumers recognize a certain name. They trust that brand because that brand's associated with the people who provide that service or product. And so they should be able to capture that revenue. They've earned that in the marketplace. So we'd be essentially stealing from the Starbucks company, I think, effectively, if we were be allowed to do that. But let's say we had, maybe Good Coffee or some other brand name. We can go and compete with Starbucks, and that's not a very good business idea, but we could certainly legally do that, right?
Okay.
Now, trademark also can apply not only to just the business name. Well, that's usually the most important, usually. But you can also get trademark rights in your logo, for instance. As well, you can get trademark rights in a catchphrase, right? Just do it for Nike, right? Or I'm loving it for McDonald's, for instance, right? Again, you can have trademark in that. And you can have trademark in some other things like sounds, right? So remember the NBC ding, 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 ding.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Or if you have a really catchy jingle, you could even consider getting a sound trademark. Wow. In that.
Wow.
And then as well as packaging of products. Most of your listeners are in the service industry, so it doesn't really apply, but certainly sometimes you even could, like if you had a particularly distinctive trucks or mowers or something, theoretically you could get trademark rights in that. I've never quite done something like that, but it's theoretically possible to look at.
Sure.
Because then, it would be the same type of confusion. Like if they had like some different, it would have to be quite distinctive. It couldn't just be a regular truck, but if you had like, a special paint job or something.
Sure.
And then the consumers would associate that paint job with your truck, and it becomes that same type of dynamic where somebody could freeload off of that if they could rip it off. So that's what. Okay, go ahead, Brian.
Well, so that's the trademark side of things, and it's incredibly important because as we're growing our business, a lot of us we spend a lot of time on our marketing, our logo. So what if you have Envy Lawn Care, this green crest, and you have these colors, but then what happens, Mark, if somebody else across town or in the same town starts Envy Lawn Care as well? That's that confusion you're talking about, right? Yeah,
and look, this is why it's at least good to try to establish this stuff early on, as early as you can. So that you'd have a better chance of prevailing if you got into a fight with somebody. And in the process, you could send them, a cease and desist letter. People have heard of that, right? Which just means, and a letter from a lawyer that's going to say, "Hey, we think you're infringing. We want you to stop now, or else you're threatening to sue them," right?
Sure.
And then if you're not able to work something out with that individual, then maybe you end up having to take them to court. That's a whole conversation we'll have to have with a lawyer at that point.
Sure. Well, and that's why we're having this conversation because around town where I live, and me and Mark, we've had some pretty good conversations way before this podcast, and I was throwing up on Mark, and I said, Mark, I was just just be totally honest with you, I was getting really frustrated. Where I live, there's 5 different Brian's-esque companies now. There's a Brian's Landscaping, a Brian's Property Services, a Brian's Yard Service. There's like all these different Brian's, and in my city, I am the Brian's guy, and it's a little frustrating. And so, some of these people might get these polite letters eventually, because I'm just being honest. Like, as I didn't imagine these problems 10 years ago, but now all this, and it's not even really the competition side of things, because I'm not worried about them in terms of like cutting grass or offering service. But what happened is that I was at the gym, and I've told this story to Mark. I was at the gym a year ago, and I was doing some CrossFit, and these 2 ladies, they're moms, and they're really nice customers of mine, and they both came up to me and they said, "Hey, we're good for lawn service this year." This is like in February, March, and I said, "Okay, cool." Yeah. And they go, "Yeah." They both said, I mean, simultaneously, "Yeah, I'm not sure why I got your postcard on the mailbox, but just go ahead and re-sign us up." And I thought to myself, I haven't passed out any postcards yet or any marketing materials yet. And I said, "What postcard?" And they said, "Oh yeah, like Brian's Landscaping." And I said, "That's not me." And they go, "Oh yeah, well, it's the certain color truck, the certain name, the exact postcard." I mean, literally, people are ripping off my stuff.
Wow.
And I said, "This is not cool." And so, but again, if I don't have these things trademarked or copyrighted, I can't start to put my foot down necessarily, right? Like I'd be bluffing if I started to send some of this stuff. Now, the other side of the other oar in the water of this little rowboat was YouTube. Like, I threw all my stuff out there on the internet, which is fine. And my idea is to give every single thing that I have away. But when it does come to, logo creation, a lot of folks, they have their own original ideas and thoughts, which is super cool. But we do have some people that copy. Copying for copying's sake without personalizing it to you is unfortunately just a little lazy. And I wouldn't, take the general idea or concept or things you like from somebody, but then when you do that, you have to personalize it and make it your own. And even the people that direct copy, God bless them. I've never been like, "Hey, take that down," or honestly, quite the opposite. I'm like, "Dude, good for you." Like, they're 600 miles away in, Illinois or I don't know, Tennessee. Like, it's a non-issue. But I just don't want to make sure that because I have my stuff out there on the internet, that if it ever came full circle, like, "No, dude, like, I own this. I was first. This is mine. And that person's copying me, not me copying them." Does that make sense, Mark? And that's kind of
yes, and that's one of the reasons. Like, and just to one thing to understand is that that what you touched on, Brian, is a firsthand experience of this type of consumer confusion that is kind of the core of what trademark law is all about, because these other entities are out there clearly ripping off your goodwill, right? You have a certain level of goodwill, especially in that community with what you've done, and as well, I guess now nationally with some of the media stuff. And it's, there's somebody that says something, "Hey, here's an opportunity that they may be getting business that should just have gone to you," right? But because those ladies thought you were them. And so again, that's really what the core of what we're trying to prevent here.
Right. And okay, so what is totally. So this is where this whole conversation, just so people know, started with me a couple months back with Mark and his services, because again, it's not even just because I put myself on the internet. That's 10% of the issue. The real issue was, dude, people are jacking my stuff in real life, and I'm getting really, 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 really frustrated with it, and it's confusing my customers. And so, so Mark, maybe somebody's just starting out in business. Like, well, I guess before we go down that rabbit hole, what's the difference between trademark and copy? Like, what is copyright law?
So copyright is the difference is that, remember, we talked about trademark law protecting your brand, right? Whereas what copyright is doing is protecting the creative elements of work that is created and for instance, things like artwork, or for instance, audio work, like for instance, this podcast itself could be copyright it.
Sure.
Right. So if somebody were to take this copy, just download it. I don't even know if you can do that, whatever, in your system. But let's say you could copy this or record it and then just start distributing it out there without your consent. That would be a violation of copyright law.
Okay.
As well, let's say that you have if you write a book or if you have your videos on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Well, those things are someone were to somehow copy those and distribute them, that would be a violation of copyright law because you have the right to control the copying of that type of material. And the reason why copyright law is so important is just because it just recognizes the fact that when you have any kind of fixed medium of exchange like paper or nowadays any kind of digital medium, movies, videos, sound recordings, it even applies to computer software, right? It would be totally the value of the work to create those things is in creating it. Like if you have, just imagine and I know this is antiquated, but imagine like a CD with music on it, right? The CD itself is worth like 25 cents, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something like that, right? But why would anyone pay $20 for it? It's because of what's on. It's because of the incredible amount of talent and dedication that goes into creating, for instance, a best-selling music album.
Okay.
And it would be just completely unfair if people could just one person could buy one copy and then just give it to everyone, all their friends or whatever have you, and then the person that created the art is going to get cut out of any realistic profit there. And so in your case, for instance, the YouTube videos you create, right? Those have value.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a lot of, think of the effort it takes to put these things together, the time and all of that stuff, and your expertise as well. And so copyright is protecting those.
Well, even people's marketing and print materials, right? Like their handbooks, their postcards. It's simple, but like that's copyrighted material. It's your intellectual property. It's your brand. It's your property. Like you want to protect that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are some areas where you'll see copyright and trademark kind of overlap a little bit, and it's okay to overlap things, right? Because you're just getting a little bit of extra protection around these areas. So, for instance, let's say you had a company logo, right? I get this question all the time. So, like, trademark that or copyright it? Well, you could really do both theoretically, right? Mm-hmm. Usually, if you're in business, the trademark is more relevant because the way it would work, and I'm using this logo as an example because it illustrates the contrast between trademark and copyright that you're asking about, which is like, so if you have that company logo, if someone else were to just copyright would protect against someone just taking copies of that logo and doing something with it. Just the act of copying that logo is an act of infringement if it's outside of their own personal use, let's say. That act of copying is itself the infringement. Whereas in trademark, the infringement is in doing something that causes consumer confusion. So let's say instead of copying it, they just design a logo that's just kind of very eerily similar to your logo. And then you have this scenario where people start getting confused about who's which company. Okay, that would be trademark infringement, might not be copyright infringement because maybe it isn't quite a full copy of the logo.
Okay,
perhaps.
Sure.
In both of these areas, it should be noted that the infringement doesn't have to be exact. Okay, so they can't just change one little piece of the design and get out of either trademark or copyright. With copyright, it just has to do with, there's a judgment call if there was a fight over, how different is this, right? Is this really just ripping this off, or is this just taking a concept and creating your own new work, which is okay to do?
Right. Like if you have the same logo and you just make it, green, it's like, no, dude, that's the same logo. Like,
yeah, that's the same logo. You'd still be violating the copyright in that case.
Sure.
Now, trademark, it all has to do with the consumer perception of it, right? So in trademark, we don't care necessarily whether you copied it. Like you could copy theoretically in trademark, right? You could copy something from somebody else maybe, but let's say if they're not using that logo in this particular business area, it actually wouldn't be a trademark infringement. It might be a copyright infringement.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And one thing I was going to say, like, so like if you have Nike shoes, right? And it's just Do It. Like you can still have your business called like Nike Landscaping. Like maybe your last name is Nike. Like you can still have like Nike Landscaping from what I understand. Because it's not.
Yes. Here's the deal with that one, Brian. It's that you're right, generally speaking.
Okay.
Although that example isn't the best because trademark law has something called anti-dilution protection, and that applies only to very famous marks.
Okay.
So a very famous mark like Nike, for instance, please just don't use that name or that logo for anything.
Sure.
Right? You're gonna put yourself in trouble, right?
100%. That's why I want to ask you.
But most of the time, 95% of the time, you're right. That if you're in a different business area, then there won't be confusion. I mean, you take a look at the trademark website and search around a little bit, you'll see, put any kind of common name for a business, you'll see all kinds of trademarks in all sorts of different business areas that have been taken. That said, though, the best choice, if you're starting something new, is to choose a trademark name that is highly distinctive. So this is a good conversation about trademark law, especially because your listeners a lot of times are people getting started or in the early stages. So they're maybe at the stage where they're selecting a name, right? And so what you need to understand about selecting a name is that the strength of your trademark name is inversely proportional to how descriptive that name is to what you're doing. And this can be a little counterintuitive for some business owners, because a lot of business owners, for business or marketing reasons, might want to have a name that is very descriptive of what they're doing. So, for instance, let's say a very, going back to our earlier example, let's say, okay, we're not going to call it coffee shop Starbucks. That's stupid, Brian, right? Let's we know we're going to get sued. We're not going to do that.
Sure.
Let's say we open up a coffee shop and we'll just call it coffee shop and we'll get a trademark on that. No, obviously not, right? Because that's a generic term. And so you can never have trademark rights at all in a generic term. And that's kind of obvious, right? Because that would just be silly, right? If you could stop other people from calling their coffee shop a coffee shop, right?
Sure.
That'd be ridiculous.
Sure.
But when you take a step back, though, what people do need to think about is that there's a sliding scale from that, right? So it isn't enough to just not be generic. You also really don't want to be descriptive. So if we call our coffee shop Hot and Fresh Coffee, we're going to have a tough time getting a trademark on that.
Okay.
Probably wouldn't be able to get it, if we, but if you call it, like a Starbucks, for instance, is a good name, because that name, it's not even a word in the English language. It's not someone's surname. It's not a geographical location, which has a little extra hurdle sometimes to get the trademark. It's just Xerox, right? Or Microsoft, Google. These aren't even words in the English language. Like the most distinctive trademarks aren't even words at all. Or they're words that don't have anything to do with what you're selling. So I like to illustrate this with the example of Apple, right? Apple is a very strong trademark for, what do they do? Computers, tablets, smartphones, digital music services, whatever they do nowadays, right?
Sure.
So I'm sure they have a strong trademark on all of that. But let's say they say, okay, we're going to branch out, guys, and we're going to buy up a bunch of apple orchards and sell apples. Well, they could do that, but they wouldn't have any trademark right in selling the apples, because with respect to that business area, apple is a generic term, obviously. So they have no trademark rights there.
Good tips. Makes sense.
And so that's what I always tell clients is that, look, I understand. I totally get small business people. Like, maybe you didn't need to call yourself Hot and Fresh Coffee because you think that's going to play well in the marketplace. But at least talk to me or another trademark lawyer about the trade-off, because, your ability to stop other people from being in that space is going to be more limited. Whereas if you come up with something a little more interesting, creative, sometimes some ideas are just, go through your dictionary and pick out a word that you just think is cool, or maybe, sort of combine names of things together and create this sort of word that just seems cool.
Sure.
Those are different creative ways to come about with the names. And this is important in the early stages. I analogize selection of your trademark name to kind of dating and marriage and stuff like that, right? So if you're in the early stages of business, you're just dating this name, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I've had a lot of clients where they'll say, okay, Goodman, I want to trademark this name. And then I punch it into the trademark office. I'm like, oh my God, here's some big companies and they're sort of similar areas that kind of have this name, dude. We could be running into a buzzsaw here, right?
Right.
And so then it's like, okay, just get your creative juices going and come up with another name that'll be just as cool, and maybe we will be in a clear space there, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a little different sometimes, and I have somebody come in and say, I've been in business for 10 years under this name. I never really took care of the trademark, and I want to do it now. Okay, that's cool, but I'm not even going to worry about searching. I'm just going to file it and see if we can get what we can, because I realize that person has invested a ton of time, money, and energy in that name. So let's just get what we can and fight for it if we have to.
That's good,
right?
stuff.
Because at that point, you're married to that name, right?
Well,
you've invested in that name.
I'm thinking to myself, like, I'm silent on this one because I'm just trying to like take it all in, because this is good stuff. Like, I did a video on YouTube probably about 2 years ago talking about how to pick out the name for your business, and I gave a bunch of generic tips, with like, hey, if maybe you don't want to be like Matt's Lawn Care, maybe you want to be like Matt's Property Management, or something more professional. I gave a lot of tips and suggestions about professionalism, how to sound like an actual contractor, not the high school kid or the neighborhood lawn boy, right? Which is fine. That's how I got started. In fact, this is why my mouth is kind of dropped open here, because I remember, Mark, like it was yesterday at my county offices, registering my DBA in the beginning, because that's what I thought you do, and that was fine. But I was like, Brian's Lawn Care. Okay, cool. But that name was taken, and I panicked, and I was like, well, Brian's Lawn Maintenance, and that's fine. It's been the name that we've stuck with for 10 years, 12 years now. Looking back on it, I probably would have called my business something different, so I wasn't so strapped to the business, because now everybody wants Brian to cut their lawn, right? Which is fine. But I've also embraced it too, because, hey, you get me every time, right? Is what I always say. That's my tagline. You get me every time. But these are all, like you said, conversations that you need to have as you start, grow, and your business evolves, because, making sure you just do your due diligence with like making sure the website's available, maybe all the social media handles, my wife ran into this with her blog. Like, she was trying to, the Instagram was available for what she wanted to make it, but the website had already been taken by another girl who wasn't doing what she was doing, but that website was already taken. And I'm like, well, that's frustrating. So she had to essentially scrap or redo everything, or modify it, right? And so, really, really, really good tips. Can no right or wrong answer here, but I just want to pick your brain and kind of keep coming at you with these questions. But when should somebody? I guess you even might have already kind of alluded to this answer just now, but when should somebody start having those conversations with somebody like you, or a good trademark copyright lawyer, when they're starting, like you said in the beginning, we're trying to start an LLC, we're trying to buy equipment, money's tight, but should you say, hey, you know what, make sure you save an extra $1,000, $2,000 before you decide to go all in to register an LLC and all of your copy and your trademark law? Or is that something that as money comes in, cross your T's and dot your I's? What's your professional opinion?
Yeah, so obviously it's a tough one. I mean, it's always better to get this stuff going earlier, right? So if someone else were to come in, for instance, if you file a trademark registration, U.S. trademark registration, you have priority over somebody else with the same or similar name in the same area if they came in with that.
Sure.
That said, I do respect and understand that, if you're starting out, things can be tight and it might not be your top priority. So I think you would the way to answer it is, you'd either want to get it done right away if you can, or if you can't, at least maybe after you've kind of gotten established with some decent level of cash flow.
Sure.
and especially if you market it, if you're pretty committed to that name, right, or that logo or whatever your branding is. I know that in the early days, some people just it's just their own small little shop, so it doesn't make that much difference. But especially if you want to take that leap and really start doing some significant marketing before you do that, you might want to have that conversation.
Sure.
Right, because that's where, again, the trademark legal expenses, it's some money, but it's actually not that much compared to things like higher levels of marketing and that type of cost. Right. So if you're going to launch at that level, definitely have the conversation. Ideally, right at the beginning, if you can.
Okay, that's fair.
So,
well, my attitude is this is stuff that I didn't even think about 10, 12 years ago because nobody was talking about it. Nobody talks about it as a small business owner. Very few people. Yeah. I mean, even, just getting, working with the Rich Dad, team and advisors and people and all the Robert Kiyosaki books, like sometimes it's mentioned in there, but it's not something that you super think about. But here's the deal. I will affirmatively say that there is a lot of this stuff that goes on behind the scenes, like you said, Mark, with like the bigger companies, and they do this. They do this all day, all night, and the big boys, they do this. And so if you're running a lawn and landscape company, and you're in year 5, you're making $100,000 a year, gross. You got your business starting to move, and you want to, here's the deal. You run a business. You have to evaluate these things. And so I, in the last 12 months, thought about this. I said, you know what? We're making good money. We're making, good is relative, but we're making good money. We're cash flow positive. We're cash flowing. Things are good. We're starting to bank money. We're putting money in the bank the last couple of years. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I want my money, which I call employees. I want my little employees to work for me. Well, I could put money into a CD, the stock market, a real estate investment. I can go all great things. I can go buy a Tesla. I can go buy a house. I can do 1,000 things with my money, just like all of you guys. Well, as I round out my business, right, and I button things up, and I really start putting some of these puzzle pieces into their final resting spot, and I put my business under the microscope. Well, I just know that when I put my business under the magnifying glass, there were some things that I wanted to invest into. And, it might be extra credit, it might be redundant, it might be maybe overkill for a guy running a lawn and landscape business, but not really. Here's what I'd say. If you're a small business owner and, you're in year 3, 4, 5, this might be something that you want to evaluate if you really value your branding and your logo and your name, because again, hindsight's 2020. I did not imagine 5 or 6 different people where I live, having such a similar name to where it is now creating confusion in my town. And it's frustrating. And so I would just implore you guys before you go buy money on clothes and trips and stupid stuff, try to button this stuff up. It's actually pretty nominal. It's a couple grand to do it right. We'll get into, if people want to learn more, they can reach out to you. But I guess the question that I asked was, when should you start? Well, in the beginning, if you got the funds, but definitely over the next few years, definitely try to clean that up and just try to evaluate it, because the power of a name, the power of the branding, the power of marketing, it's huge, and you want to make sure that you're really protecting that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So,
one thing I'd add, Brian, and it won't apply to all of the people, but we've mentioned patents and stuff. If you are somebody that if you have a business related to some kind of an invention, right? In that case, you have to file the patent application early in the process legally.
Sure.
Right. So let's say you invent a new kind of lawnmower design. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's different. So like with trademark or copyright, you could get the registrations done later on in the process. There's some disadvantages to that, but you can do it.
Okay.
Whereas patent, if you don't file in the United States, if you, let's say, sell a product that it is your invention, or if you publish the idea somewhere,
mm-hmm.
You have exactly 1 year to file a patent application on that material, or else you forever lose the right to do so.
Wow.
And the reason why you have that rule is because if you just think about it, like let's say you do come up with an amazing new lawnmower design, right? It cuts twice as fast and, more efficiently or something like that, right? And you start selling these new lawnmowers. Well, let's say I look at that and go, wow, that seems like a really cool new product, and I'd like to go into that business and compete with Brian, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I do a patent search, and if you don't have a patent, you don't mark your product as patent pending or anything. I'm free to go in there. So let's say I invest $1 million and build a new factory to compete with you. It would be unfair for you to then get a patent later and shut me out of that business because I went in fairly, right? You had no patent application on file or anything, and so it's fair game for me.
Well, that's it's interesting because there is a actual personal example case study in my industry of there's a brand that makes stand-on mowers, and they so like you stand on the back end of it, and the platform that they designed, they were sitting in between the axles, the pumps, and they had exclusivity for what was it, 7 years or something, Mark, for a patent law like that. And they crush the market. They are the I don't know by sales volume if they sell the most, but probably market share they do very, very well. Well, about a year ago that patent expired, I think you'd call it, and like the other companies, man, they weren't messing around. They had been working on this for 3 years. They just couldn't obviously sell it, right? And but I mean on day 7 years, let's say it's 2,100 days. On 2,101, they all dropped their new stand-on mower.
Wow!
I mean,
that's interesting. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And the gentleman listening to this, his name is Ed. He's a super smart guy, and I know he was keeping the sharks at an arm's distance for as long as he could, because then you get these other billion-dollar companies that are wanting to get in on that market. And I mean, like literally the next day, the brand new this, the brand new that, and they all had that technology. And it was,
you know what, Brian? If Ed's listening, I think that the fact that happened is just a
case study,
a proof that really Ed's invention was really, really great, right?
100%.
Because everybody was chomping at the bit to do it, and they couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and incidentally, patents do expire. Unfortunately, that's one of the things that's cool about trademarks. Is trademarks actually never expire, right? Right. Ford Motor Company still a trademark, right? They've been around for 120 years or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now patents do expire, and the reason why they do is that the idea with patents is that if you have a cool new invention, we want to reward you for that and allow you to have that exclusivity so that you can really profit from it. But then at the end of the day, we want that contributed to the public domain so that it makes advances technology and so forth in the future. And so that's kind of but then that's the thing, is you want to really be prepared to maximize that time when you have the exclusivity, and then after that it's just fair competition.
Sure. Hey, this might be a weird question, but while I got you, I'm a big Tesla guy. What's your professional opinion about Tesla with all their patents being open sourced? You got 10 seconds? Any thoughts on that? This is a rabbit hole.
Tell me about that. I have probably too many small children to be following the news enough to know. So tell me the backstory on this. What's Tesla? What do they do? They have.
That's it. What do you
mean open source? You mean they allow
anybody can use their technology, like to a degree. Like I don't know the full story, but I know that all their technology that they've come up with, it's all open source, meaning like GM, Ford, Chrysler, all these other guys can use their stuff because Elon literally does want to, advance the human civilization and technology and autonomous and sustainable energy and, interplanetary, whatever you call it, civilizations. And so he is literally open. I mean, I've heard business. I know some auto executives, and very, very, very wealthy, powerful people. And my friend Mike, he's a guest on my show. He does work for a lot of wealthy, powerful people as well. And that's automotive. That's Michigan. That we know these people. And there's some people that are moving these aircraft carriers, and they're like audacity is not the right word, but like the craziness of the fact that he would open all that stuff up and not keep it exclusive is just crazy to just kind of put proof in the pudding about how much that guy believes in what he's doing with not only Tesla but trying to help the human race. And again, I don't have any stock in Tesla. I'm not trying to promote Tesla. You guys know that.
Yeah.
But it's just, I really respect the guy and what he's trying to do. But that's just crazy, isn't it? Like a guy would give away everything like that. I don't know.
Well, it is interesting, and look, in certain circumstances, there can be some novel strategies that can be important or that you might want to do. I mean,
sure.
I think it's just, you want at least the patent system and the intellectual property system is there if you want to take advantage of it to benefit yourself as a business. It's obviously not required that you take advantage of that, although you can be subjected to other people's intellectual property no matter how nice you are, right? Of course.
Right.
Like that theoretically wouldn't stop the other automakers from suing Tesla under their patents if they were. Hopefully they wouldn't, right? But that would be really, really crappy.
Yeah, no,
I was thinking about that.
I was just wondering, like, what's like the MO behind that. But I think he sincerely does want to see the people have, better vehicles, safer vehicles, sustainable energy, blah blah blah. He's definitely one of those guys that puts his money where his mouth is.
I will say, Brian, that there was one interesting what came to mind when you were saying that, and I haven't looked into the Tesla example much, but I know that back in the day when computers, and I'm a Silicon Valley kid originally from that area, right?
Sure.
So, and my father's a computer software guy, so I know some about this stuff. And it's like, back in the day, when Microsoft and Apple were competing to be the main platform operating system for, personal computers and stuff, one of the reasons why Microsoft, this is another example where in some cases you might want to give certain things out and allow people to use things, is that Microsoft allows their source code to be kind of open source. And whereas Apple kept everything very, very tight, and they had no idea, other programmers could not get into their source code to try to work with it, right? And so what happened is that all the other programs then wrote to Windows because they could get access to the source code and they could integrate their programs easily with Windows, whereas Apple was much more difficult at that time. And that's why Microsoft really became dominant in that area. Now, Apple has come, they dominate now the iPhones,
all the
iPads, and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
But still, for business computers, everybody still uses Microsoft Windows, and at least the narrative out there is that was one of the reasons why is that it was just impossible to and you couldn't write to Apple because you couldn't get access to their source code, so you couldn't write something that would be compatible easily with their stuff.
Interesting. Well,
so it became a problem.
Probably goes full.
On the flip side of that,
go ahead. Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
And then the flip side of that, though, that's part of also why viruses and stuff don't get into Apple as easily, right? Because they're tighter code. So there's trade-offs, all these things. You kind of have to sort your way through it.
Well, it kind of reminds me of the Bill Gates quote, like if China's ripping off their stuff, and they said, well, if they're gonna rip off anybody, let's make sure it's us. One of those out front being bold kind of things. Well, interesting. Well, I had a couple thoughts that I just wanted to wrap up with was, number one, how can people get a hold of you? Because, honestly, I've had a great experience with you and your firm and everything that you got going on. You spent a good half hour on a consultation with me, and we were just shooting the mustard. And it was a little bit... I had to really give you some context about everything I got going on because it was a different case study, and you're like, what are you doing again? And what's this? And your YouTube and all this. And so a lot of my stuff is very intermingled, which is a very unique situation. But, for some of the guys that are listening, I'm sure that they have questions if they want to trademark some of their logos. I'll be honest with you too, Mark. There's a lot of folks that listen to the show, and they also are inventors. There's so many guys in my industry that they create certain little niche products, and they want to protect it, and maybe they don't have a go-to guy for patent law or copyright or trademark. So between the people that come up with all these cool, like there's a guy called the Incredible Bottle, little bottle that you carry with you, and there's another guy that's got this Darwin grip thing, and it's like a handle extension for your trimmer. Another guy, he made a stand-on blower, and he just sold his company for like $15 million.
Wow.
Yeah, just crazy little stuff. But there's so many guys like me that are entrepreneurial. They're thinkers. They're inventors. I'm sure I've got some ideas behind the scenes. So if people want to whether they just trademark their logo and their name, which is what I'm kind of using you in that facility, that capacity, I should say. But for anybody else that wants to do logos and all that mess, or they're inventors, or they just want to have these kind of conversations and explore their options, how can people reach out to you? Are you still taking on clients and calls and making yourself available, or where are you at in that whole process?
Yeah, I'm still available. I mean, you can go to the website. I guess that'll be in the show notes. Goodman Law Nevada, the state of Nevada spelled out .com. I mean, you can call my office and schedule a consultation.
Sure.
775-473-4268.
Cool.
And we, like you said, we do a complimentary initial half hour
consultation
chat with that.
Cool.
And so you can take advantage of that. You can find me on social media. I'm not a huge social media person yet, but for instance, LinkedIn, I've got a zillion contacts.
Sure.
So you can be another contact if you want. And
cool.
Yeah, so
okay.
That's really the best way to do it.
Cool. No, that's really good. So I'll make sure to leave your office in the show notes. Again, just the elephant in the room. How much is like maybe a trademark or a copyright? Like just generic rates, maybe ballpark, just so people know what they're looking at if they want to go down this rabbit hole.
Yeah, ballpark, U.S. trademark registration. My program, the way I've worked, and I've worked this way for several years now, is I will charge a flat fee for the whole process, which includes preparing and filing the trademark application, as well as kind of all of that back and forth with the trademark office.
Mm-hmm.
But what it doesn't include is if there's some sort of contested matter, right? If there's a refusal and we need to write a legal argument, that's why we think the trademark examining attorney is wrong, as a quote more, right?
Okay.
Or if appeal that we need to do, or if there's an opposition with another party, and that'd be a whole different thing. So right now that charge is $1,900, and then you have some trademark office filing fees on top of that. Copyrights are a little bit, and one of the things since the last time we talked, Brian, actually, I've come up with a full kind of price menu. Right, I don't publish it online, but if you reach out to my office, I'd email it to you.
Sure.
And to your listeners.
Every case is a little dynamic.
So that you'd have, everything's a little bit different, but at least I have for the things that are pretty regular practice for me, I have kind of set fees for those things. So like for copyright, if it's a regular single work, $500, and I think I was at $900 or so if you do a collective work,
sure,
which is something where you have like a full album, let's say, that you wanted to put together in one.
Okay. Well, I know you and I were talking, and you put a special package together for me because not like in a discounted rate or any fashion, but just you knew what I needed, and then and in fact I even respect you as much and more on the call because you were like, no, you could do this, and this, but I don't think you're there yet. Maybe think about if you want to make an investment, because there's like another. Like $750 to do some copy and maybe even another brand and name. And I was like, well, I'm not really there yet. And you're like, no, I don't think you are either. And so you were really fair, which I always appreciate that, and I had a couple things that you did do, and it was definitely a couple bucks, but you know what? It's an investment. It's an investment into me. It's an investment into my companies. It's an investment into the next 10, 20, 30 years, however long we're doing all this mess. And so I just had a really good experience. And again, I wanted to share you and your expertise with my audience because, again, this is one of those things that is just not talked about at all. Definitely not enough, let alone at all, especially my industry. And it's super, super important, super critical, as we're growing and running our businesses. Hey, Mark, last thing, I'll just leave it open, and I try to do this with my guests, is just kind of like an open mic. Is there any last tips or macro thought you're trying to leave everybody, or maybe a big suggestion that you want to leave with our audience while we got you? Open mic.
Oh, open mic is always the hardest because it's not directed. But I think we had a really good conversation about these things, and one of the things I was just really, really thrilled to get to go on this podcast, and it was really random. I think Brian and I just talked and we had a podcast. And, hey, maybe they could come on the podcast and do that.
Yes.
And these are the types of conversations that you'll get to have kind of one-on-one if you do make it an appointment to talk to me.
Yes.
And it'll be kind of just as cool as this podcast conversation, except that it's going to be tailored to your specific needs and your situation.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's really where the value, I think, will come in for you to do that. I think that I don't want people, I think for some reason it's amazing because I'm such a chill guy, but like, I still find that sometimes people, when they come and meet with me or talk to me, they're like nervous, right? I guess talking to a lawyer is somehow inherently scary to some people. And at least for me, I know that there's some lawyers out there that kind of abrasive, I know. So maybe there's a little bit of an earned reputation in the market somewhere, but it's always fun and cool to talk to me. It's never going to be something you should be like intimidated about or nervous or anxious about doing.
That's awesome.
So
I will echo that. I will agree. Well, I remember our first conversation. I'm like, we had a consultation, and I said, hey, I know you do the first 30 minutes free. I said, I want you to already bill me for another 30 minutes because we talked for an hour and 20 minutes. And
we did.
And you're like, what? I'm like, just trust me, dude. I got questions. And you were like, who are you? And I'm like, listen, I do this stuff with YouTube. I do this stuff with landscaping. I've got a million questions. Like, nobody talks about this stuff. And you're like, all right. And I remember you're like, well, 1 second, let me get to my office. I have a comfy chair there, and let's talk. And so I threw up on you. I was an expensive first date because at the end of it, I had told you, I said, Mark, I said, I super respect you. You've answered every question I have. You're very transparent. We started moving along with things. And then shortly thereafter, I emailed you back and I said, hey, I know this is a total, shooting from the hip, but I said, would you like to share with my audience? Because I think a lot of people could benefit from what you're doing. And you're like, really? Like, I don't, what I do is valuable, but I don't know if I can help your audience. And I said 100%. I said, this is a conversation that needs to happen, and not a lot of people are doing it. And if people want to move forward with it, awesome. If not, hey, no big deal. But at least you can always say that we told you so. That's just what, how business works, man. At least we told you so. So any which way, I just wanted to say, I just want to wrap up with a couple nice thoughts there, because I really do value your time and appreciate you jumping on the podcast for sure.
Right. And one other final thought, and this is just something I wanted to throw out, because I have no idea with how big Brian's podcast is. I assume it's taking over the world, but I don't know. But I had actually have, with some of the people tighter in my circle, toyed with the idea of doing my own podcast that kind of had a podcast or YouTube channel. I haven't even thought about this. It's a very early stage idea that really just focused in on these areas, because it's funny because I don't know how the audience will react to this podcast, but I've done, a number of public speaking engagements at local inventors associations or business groups or that kind of thing, those kinds of things. And people react really well and think this is, it's really, they really enjoy my style and my speaking and so forth. And yet I think about it and I go, like, if this were presented to a general audience, most people would be like, boring, right? I mean,
sure.
Totally not interested. But if you happen to be in, the situation where these things, these legal areas and concepts apply, it's very interesting and fun for those people. So maybe there is a niche.
100%.
See what people think on your audience. You put it in comments and social media stuff or whatever have you, right?
100%. Well, we have an audience of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs out there that I firmly believe in what I do. I drink my own Kool-Aid. I think that guys want to grow, they want to succeed, they want to crush it. And you know what? And I'll be honest with you, I'm not teaching people how to be the best lawn care guy. I'm teaching people how to be business owners. And there's going to be a time when I have a real estate company and a fast food franchise company, and I'm cutting my teeth with my lawn and landscape company and now my media company. And then I've learned from Kiyosaki and these guys that eventually you change the name, you change this, but the concept to build companies is very simple. And once you start kind of realizing the macro of it, you can create many companies. And if you want to be a capitalist and get wealthy and build big businesses, awesome. And you know what you're doing and what I'm trying to do, I should say, is build a network. I want to learn these things. I want to learn, I don't want to be a professional. I don't want to be the expert in every said category. That's why we have guys like you who do, you're a 10 in your category. I'm a 10 in my category. And, if we stay in our lane, we both can, do really, really powerful things for each other, But again, I'm not trying to be a patent lawyer. I've got the expert on the phone. And so, yeah, I think people want to hear this kind of content. So if the Mark Goodman podcast comes out, we'll definitely update the show notes. But Mark, you should do it. So I love it. All right, cool.
Awesome.
All right, guys. Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode of the Fullerton Unfiltered podcast. If you guys haven't already left a 5-star review, I don't know what you guys are waiting for, because I can't bring you any better content than this. I'm just having fun. This is the meat. This is the stuff that you guys always are asking behind the scenes, is the X's and O's of how to grow a business. So if you guys haven't left a 5-star rating and a couple sentence review, let us know how we're doing. We super appreciate that. And that's where we're going to end it. Mark, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast, brother. We really appreciate the time.
Yeah, this was amazing.
Cool deal. All right, guys. Well, we'll catch up with you guys on the next episode of the Fullerton Unfiltered podcast. We'll catch up with you guys on the next one. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for taking the time to listen to the Fullerton Unfiltered podcast with Brian Fullerton. We hope you enjoyed this production. If so, please consider leaving us a 5-star review for the show. While the techniques and ideas presented here are designed to help you grow a more successful and profitable business, no one can guarantee these results for you. We want to emphasize that entrepreneurship is not easy, and the ideas presented here are just the opinions of Brian Fullerton and his respective guests. No one can guarantee success for you. That being said, we hope the ideas presented here help you and motivate you to go on out there and crush it with your own business.
Fullerton Unfiltered podcast.
Thanks for listening, and we hope to see you on the next episode.